This presentation today. It's going to be very much focused on an IPO that's going live tomorrow. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get started here immediately. Okay, my screen is loaded. Okay, so everyone is asking the wrong question right now. Then the question is about the SpaceX. They're asking whether it is a good rocket company and is going to take everyone to Mars. Should I buy the stock? And look, these are good questions. They're great questions, but they're wrong and they're not framed it correctly. What we're actually looking here is something that has not existed before. And that is the fundamental shift that we're experiencing today. And this is going to bring a new era of civilization. And most people, they don't have any idea of what's happening. So let's fix that. Let's get started on this journey. There's a lot that I'm going to cover today. So bear with me. It's going to be very, very beneficial. So stick around and I'll tell you more about what are the right questions that you need to ask and how you need to prepare for the SpaceX IPO. So here's the thing about the mental models. Once you have a wrong mental model, everything you see tries to confirm it. People look at the SpaceX and they see, okay, well, this is rockets, this is launches, and then they see Elon Musk doing the Elon Musk thing, and they file it under the cool space company. But that's just looking at how internet was during the DARPA days, the early DARPA days. Like, oh, neat, this is the way going to be sending new emails or information from one person to the other. Well, you're technically right, but you're also missing the point. The business that matters here is not the rocket. It is what the rocket makes it possible. What do I mean by that? Now, before we get into the exact specifics of what do I mean by that, I want you to go back in time and let's acknowledge the story so we understand and we kind of connect the dots for why we're talking about this today. Because it's an impressive journey. 2002, we had Falcon 1. This was the first privately funded liquid fueled rocket to reach the lower Earth orbit. That alone would have been a legacy. But then came Falcon 9. And then this is the one thing that changed everything, the reusable rocket concept that was introduced in 2015. That moment broke the economics of entire industry, the rocket industry, in the Crew Dragon in 2022, with Starlink scaling thousands of satellites and Mars on the horizon. This is the story that we see. That's the public story that you see in the news. But here's what I want to hold on to. Every single of these milestones are also the stepping stone for something really bigger. The rocket is not the destination, it is the delivery mechanism. So, what's the reframe then? The reframe is SpaceX is not building rockets. SpaceX is building infrastructure. And I want to be precise about what do I mean by that. Because infrastructure is one of the words that get thrown away a lot in the days of AI today. Everyone's building infrastructure. But what it means is SpaceX is building the foundation layer, the fabric that other systems are going to be depending on. The rocket is actually the construction vehicle. The satellite network is the connectivity layer. The data is the raw material. And AI sitting on top of that, that's the product the civilization actually runs. This is the pattern we have seen before. The railroads, if you remember that, they were not the essential products. They were the means for moving goods from one place to the other. And same thing, the computer. The computer was not the product, but it was about collapsing the decision from one distance to the other and communicating from one person to the other. And SpaceX is all about that as well. It's an intelligent, connected system that is going to connect the entire planet all together at the same time. Now, to understand SpaceX strategically, why it's strategically positioned, you need to understand what AI requires to operate. And it's not the chatbot language that a lot of people talk about. We're talking about the planetary scale autonomous always on version that is going to come. And it has four things that it needs to make it happen. The first is the connectivity, which is the ability to reach every device, vehicle, IoT on the earth. The second is the compute, which is the processing power to run the inferences on the edge, not just having done the computation in the data center. Then we have the energy. We need a lot of energy. And you know, some of these massive chips that have been produced by NVIDIA's and other companies, they require a lot of power that needs to be continuous, that needs to be reliable. And finally, intelligence, the data flywheel that makes this whole system smarter over time. Now, here's the part that you need to make it up straight because SpaceX is credible in every single one of these layers. Not just one, not two, not three, every single one of it. And that's the entire strategy. And that's why I'm really excited about this IPO more than I've been in any IPO before. Again, not a financial advice. I'm not a financial expert, but I'm really excited about this. Let's talk about each of these layers one by one, and we're going to peel this a bit. So layer one is the connectivity. And this is where the Starlink, it stops being a satellite internet service and starts being something that is very interesting. Think about Starlink, what actually it is. It is a broad, it's not a broadband for rural areas that it does position it. Sometimes it may feel like that's what it is. Like we all have Starlink on the internet, on the planes now, and a lot of different airlines. But what it is, it's a low latency global distributed data fabric. And the output throughput is sub 20 millisecond connection. So the coverage is pretty broad. It covers every ocean, every polar region, every conflict, every jungle. The places where terrestrial fiber is never going to be able to go. And it's not going to be feasible to do that. Now, ask yourself, what happens when every autonomous vehicle, every industrial robots, IoT devices, remote sensors, military assets, the planet is always on a low latency connectivity? You don't just get the internet access, you have a nervous system for the planet, and that is powerful. Now, here's what it actually looks like in practice. The autonomous vehicle are never going to lose signal in the rural area in Montana or any parts of the world. The ship's rerouting in real time based on the weather and port congestion data. So they're prepared in advance. Aircraft live telemetry feedback back to the maintenance system on the ground. And industrial sites in the middle of nowhere, they run AI optimized operations. Remote workers in developing economy are accessing now the same tools that someone in Manhattan is going to access. So every single one of these systems are going to become the node. And if you have enough nodes, they're all connected, all generating data, they're all feeding the intelligent network, then you don't have just the environment. You have a planetary scale AI operating environment across the globe. The layer two is the compute, and this is the speculative one. And I want to be upfront about that because this is kind of a speculative things that keeps the engineers up at night. Right now, the bottleneck for AI is not the models. It is the physical infrastructure that runs it. I know we get all excited about the new models. Today Claude launched a new model, but that's not what it is. The data centers are limited by the land and they're constrained by the power, they're constrained by the latency. But if you put a data center in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's not possible. But what if you put that same data center in the orbit? Orbital computes resolve three problems at all at the same time. First, the latency. Processing happen close to where the data is generated because it's inference based. Second, the vacuum of space is the most efficient thermal management system that is ever conceived by mankind. And third is the power. We get uninterrupted solar power 99.9% of the time uptime, no grid dependency. This is not science fiction because Microsoft and AWS are already exploring orbital computing concepts. And SpaceX, in fact, is the first one to launch this in infrastructure and to make this real. Now, let's zoom out for a second and talk about why this matters. Because AI has a problem that a lot of us know. It's a very, very large physical problem. The models are getting better and better, the algorithms are getting better, but the infrastructure that it's running on is hitting hard limits. Just today, we had an OpenAI chat GPT was down for almost like 30 minutes. So the data centers are consuming more electricity than the entire countries. The GPU shortages are so severe that even the biggest AI labs in the world are rationing their compute. And Claude, if you know that it rations a lot, even if you're in a pro paid account, you can use it for some time and then you have to take a break for a few hours, then you get allocated your credit back. So 40% of the planet has no reliable internet connection. Yes, you read it right. 40% has no reliable internet connection, which means that the 40% of the planet is locked out of the AI economy. And the cooling is another piece of the problem that nobody talks about, because the thermal management alone is 30 to 40% of the total data center. So that's a huge drag on the data center management. And these are not the software problems. You cannot patch it out of this way. You cannot cover the vulnerabilities. You cannot just update the global connectivity. This is a physical infrastructure problems, and physical infrastructure problems require you to have a physical infrastructure solution. Layer three is the energy. And I want to really sit with these numbers for a second. So, AI data center energy demand is projected to grow 10x by 2030. And that's not a rounding error, that's the civilization scale energy problem. The grid, they're not going to be able to keep up. We're going to see AI companies sign deals directly with nuclear plants because the grid literally cannot deliver. It cannot even fathom how fast and how much energy do we need. Now, the orbital solar, which is in space, solar panels receive the sunlight 99% of the time. There's no cloud, there's no nighttime because it's in already in rotating around the Earth's orbit. There's no atmospheric disruption. The energy density is roughly 8 times higher than what you see in the Earth's surface because there's no atmosphere to block it. And you beam it down via a microwave to a ground station anywhere on the planet. And that's not a new idea. In fact, in 1970s, it's been explored in aerospace engineering. And what's new is that the SpaceX had made the launch cost so cheap that it might actually be economically viable to do that. And here's the layer four, which is the intelligence. And everyone gets really excited about this, and me too. This one is the one that ties all together. And this is the one that most analysts completely missed. Every time a Falcon 9 booster lands, the SpaceX AI is getting better at landing the rockets because it's taking all the data, applying to the model, and learning it. So every time a Starlink satellite gets to the orbit and it tries to avoid the debris, the routing algorithm improves because of that autonomous learning process. It's kind of a flywheel. And the flywheel is dangerous, but it's also very powerful because once it starts spinning, they're very, very, very hard to stop. The more launcher that Starship does, the SpaceX Starships does, the better the AI gets. The better the AI gets, the cheaper the models becomes, and subsequently leads to more rocket launches, more satellites. That gives us more data flowing to the system. So that's not the company. It's a self-reinforcing intelligence loop operating at a planetary scale. Now, here's the concept that I want you to introduce. It's called the coordination economy, and I wrote a very detailed post on my Substack about that. For most of human history, the bottleneck for civilization was individual productivity, and this was before AI was invented. How much a person can do. Most of the organization, like, okay, this is a job for like 10 people, you put 10 FTEs on that. Then we build the organization, we build the teams, we build the companies, we build the governance, and the bottleneck shifted to coordination. Now we need to work with teams, we need to work with groups. So, how fast the humans align and make decisions together collectively. That is still the model of operation in most part of the world, and that's how the world runs today. We have meetings, we have hierarchies, we have approval chains. Organizational introduces a lot of latency. But what happens when you have AI removing that human latency from coordination completely? When Starlink connected autonomous system can make the decision, it can communicate globally, it can in fact execute it in milliseconds without a single human being involved in that whole process. And SpaceX is building both sides of that equation simultaneously. And that is powerful and dangerous at the same time, but very, very powerful. Now, let's talk about the geopolitical dimension. And this is an important part that I really want to touch on because it gets serious. Governments, they are already observing this. They understand what's going on and what Starlink represents. And recent conflict that have arisen, I'm not going to go into the detail, but you have already seen live demonstration of the broadcast uh, intensity of some of the defensive forces around the planet, of what type of resilience, what type of connectivity it can bring to a conflict if it arises. Like Starship, SpaceX military variant, is now a strategic asset for governments around the world. And here's the key insight: whoever controls that connectivity layer, they're the one that are going to control the intelligence layer. I want to pause there and think about that point for a second. Whoever controls the connectivity layer also control the intelligence. And who controls the intelligence, they're going to control the coordination layer. So infrastructure is going to be the power and has always been. And SpaceX is building the most strategically significant infrastructure for the 21st century. So let's come back to the question that brought a lot of you here. The question is, should I buy SpaceX IPO? And again, this is not a financial advice, but I really want to reframe the question because I think that's the wrong question. The right question is, what becomes possible when an intelligence can operate anywhere on Earth? When an AI system in a shipping container in the middle of Sahara Desert has some same connectivity as the server farm in Silicon Valley, when an autonomous system can coordinate globally with human latency, when the energy constraints on AI compute are resolved from the orbit. Those are the questions that you need to ask because the answer to that question is going to determine the value of everything that SpaceX is building. The IPO is just a moment. It's a public offering and it's exciting, but it's a option that you can buy the ticket for the future. Whether you buy the stock or not, that's your personal decision. It's not my financial advice to tell you. But the question is whether you understand what that really means for you. And that is what you need to think about answering. Now, one thing that I want to talk about is the difference between the traditional companies and the companies that own the infrastructure. The traditional companies, they sell products. You make products, you have raw material, you have infrastructure, you have the value chain, you sell that product to the customer and the customer pay you the money. That's simple. It is scalable to a point depending on your manufacturing capabilities. But the infrastructure platforms are completely different. They're not in the competing the markets of products. They create the conditions under which the market operates and exists. Think about what Amazon Web Services did back in the 2000 to software. Everything was installed in a specific data centers or your laptops. And it was only delivered by installing that particular software solution on your platform itself. What AWS did is converted this whole thing into a new abbreviation, the word that we have heard, which is software as a service. And it was that term was coined after AWS gave us that compute. So now the software runs from the central location. You're accessing it through the web. Now apply that same model to the physical reality that we live in: connectivity, compute, energy, and intelligence. This is delivered as a planetary scale platform. So it's like planetary scale as a service. SpaceX is not trying to win a specific market. It's trying to build and become the infrastructure where all the markets of the future that are going to depend and operate on. And that is a fundamentally different kind of company. And it's valued differently because it's not a rocket company, and the PE ratio that you see today should not be considered as if you're considering a rocket company. And we're like, okay, wow, it's a 10x operating, it's a 10x P of its revenue, but you're only looking at the revenue that it's producing today based on the rocket company. The platform itself is the moat for this type of organization. The IPO, in my view, is not the finish line. It's actually a starting line. And I want to leave you with this. Every great infrastructure built in the history of mankind, look, if you go beyond time, like 100 years, 200 years, look at the transcontinental railroads, the interstate highways, the undersea cable network for internet, all the internet backbone. In every single one of the case, the people who understood what was being built, not the product but the infrastructure, captured the most value. And SpaceX is actually building the operating system for the next era of civilization, the physical layer that connects the power, coordinates intelligence, and the planetary scale. Well, you can debate on the valuation all day long, and it's completely fine. You can debate whether Elon is the right person to do that or not, but the infrastructure is being built, and there's no second thought about that. There's no question about it. The satellites are going to go up, the data is going to start flowing, and that flywheel is going to start spinning. So the only question that is left is, are you paying attention? If you found this useful, and subscribe to this event, and subscribe to my LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube, wherever you're watching it, because I'm going to keep rolling out these types of important insights in the AI space every week. And there's a lot more to unpack, a lot more that I want to share. So thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Thank you.